Hi, and welcome to Your Life Transformed. I'm Dr. Franchelle Hamilton, your host, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic with Dr. Biamonte. We're going to talk about Candida today, and there's so many interesting facts about this. So I'm glad he's on the show and going to kind of pick his brain. Dr. Biamonte is in private practice, and he is a clinical nutritionist. He writes questions for a nutritionist, and he's also a doctor of naturopathic medicine. So I'm excited to have him on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here too.
Well, perfect. So one of my first questions that I wanted to ask is, I guess, tell us about Candida. That'll be my first question. And then I'll have a follow-up question because I don't know if a lot of the audience members know exactly what that is.
That's a good question. Candida is a organism that lives in your intestinal tract. It's part of your flora there. It's interesting because it's a dimorphic organism, which means able to live in two different states. So Candida can live in your body as a yeast, but also as a fungus. It's the yeast that causes vaginal yeast infections and thrush in people's mouth. But at the same time, it's a fungus that lives in your intestinal tract. And it's very, very, very sneaky. It's very hard to kill and to eliminate. And it can cause over 150 different symptoms, which are completely disrelated.
Yeah.
So if someone gets Candida, they could get fatigue. They can have cognitive problems, like not be able to remember things. They walk in the room and they say, why am I here? Why did I come in this room? They forget people's names. They can start getting allergies of all different kinds. It could be airborne allergies, food allergies. They can become very chemically intolerant, very chemically sensitive. They get bloating. They get gas. They get constipation. They could get diarrhea. It could go flipping back and forth. They can feel like they have arthritis. It can cause all of these symptoms which you would never put together. And that's why it's such a quirk. It's such a quirky thing and so interesting.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you, because I don't even think I knew that. So a lot of times for the audience, and he's exactly right, most people know Candida as yeast infections for women, you know what I'm saying? And thrush in kids or baby, other or older adults. A lot of people know it from that. But I don't think anybody has ever thought about some of the other symptoms that you've just mentioned. So I guess, how did you even get into this or even realize that Candida was the sneaky little yeast and fungus that could cause all of these problems?
I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of this story because it's a long story. It's a long story. Back in 1984, I graduated from naturopathic school, and I was really interested in developing a computer. Computers were brand new back then. I wanted to get a computer that could analyze blood work the way I was learning to analyze it, because I studied with Jim Seema, I studied with Ken Brockman, all these guys who were like way ahead of their time in analyzing blood work to determine nutritional problems, not medical pathology.
Correct.
So I was looking for this, like ways to do this. And someone told me about a doctor who was out on Long Island where I lived in Massapequa named Bob Santoro. And they told me that he was already doing this. He had a computer and he already had this in motion. So I got his number from them and I called him and I met with him. And I found out that this man was working for Grumman Aerospace, and that he was the man who designed the life support systems on the lunar module. But he was also a naturopath and a nutritionist, and he was putting this computer system together. He called it biocybernetics, that would be able to study the astronauts' blood work and tell the astronauts what vitamins and supplements they needed to take while they were on the space station. So I became enamored with him. We became best of friends.
Wow.
I worked with him for many years in developing this computer. And then when the computer model was ready to work and go out there and start seeing patients with it, we had really great results with it. The computer was pinpointing all these problems with people that would be taking, like Sloan Kettering, years to try to figure out.
Yeah, exactly.
Years. It could pick up areas of their brain where they had malfunctions and all this thing. But there was a certain group of people that were coming to us that were getting weird reactions to the vitamins we were putting them on. They were having the reverse reactions to the vitamins.
Yeah.
So I volunteered to find out what was wrong with these people who were not able to tolerate all the supplements. And I found out they had Candida.
Huh.
Now, I didn't really
Interesting.
know much about Candida at the time. So I told them, well, we did stool tests on them to verify that this was true, because I picked it up in their blood that they had Candida. We
Yeah.
weren't testing for Candida in the blood, but I found a pattern in their white blood cells that indicated they had it. So I told them, this is how stupid I was. I said, you have Candida, go to your medical doctor, tell him he's got to cure you of this, and then come back and we'll put you back on the vitamins and then it'll work.
Yeah.
Boy, was I dumb.
Well,
So people came back to me and they said, the doctor said there's no such thing as Candida. He said that only chiropractors believe in that. He said all these things like this, all this nonsense. Yeah. So I looked at this and I said, okay, I did some research and I said, okay, here's where you have to go. You have to go to see either Dr. Robert Atkins or Dr. Ronald Hoffman in Manhattan, who I knew personally. They were friends of mine. I said, these guys know about Candida and they can cure you. So this whole flock of patients, they all go there and then they come back and they said, this was much better. They knew what you were talking about. They said, yes, it does exist. And they put me on these medications and I was better for a while. And then the whole thing just came back. So I said, I have to figure out what this is about.
Yeah.
So that was about 1987. I'm talking right now. So I spent the next few years researching Candida. By doing this, I would listen to what the patients told me was happening with them. And I would listen to what the doctors who were treating them were trying to do.
Yeah.
And then I was reverse engineering to figure out why this wasn't working. So I would get everything they told me. And then I bought all these books on mycology, the study of yeast and funguses.
Yeah. And
I read through all these textbooks on mycology and I figured out why it was what they were doing didn't work. And that's how I put my own protocol together to eliminate Candida. And that's also why the name of my book is called the Candida Chronicles, because it chronicles my journey through figuring out the mystery of Candida.
Wow.
Like one of the chapters in there is called The Mystery of Candida is Solved. Because most people just don't know. Most practitioners don't really have a clue how to treat it, and they usually end up making it worse.
Yeah, well, I would say I'm probably in that. So a lot of the symptoms that you mentioned sound very similar to like leaky gut, right? And so
leaky gut's often caused by Candida.
Yeah,
they're cousin conditions.
Okay.
And they typically occur together. One will cause the other.
Okay, got it. And because a lot of people attribute leaky gut to more bacteria overgrowth, but obviously you can also have yeast. So you're saying
Candida is more of a cause of leaky gut
than bacteria.
Yes, because Candida as a fungus, it's a plant.
Yeah.
And as a plant, it grows roots. And the root system that Candida grows pierces the small blood vessels in your intestines looking for glucose. That's how you develop leaky gut from Candida. From bacteria and other things that cause leaky gut, it's more from irritation and inflammation that the gut becomes more porous.
Correct.
But Candida causes leaky gut by directly piercing through with the root system that it forms.
Wow.
That's different.
And so you're able to pick this up. How are you able to see that? Just on microscopic or blood work? You were able to kind of pick that up too?
No, not leaky gut.
Okay.
For leaky gut, we have to use the legitimate tests for leaky gut.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'll tell you the biggest issue I have with leaky gut is patients who are on these forums and these chat boards.
Yep.
Who assume they have leaky gut. Now, I've had so many patients come into my office. They sit down and they say, I have the worst case of leaky gut that you're ever going to see in your life as a practitioner. Yeah. I've been treating it for 10 years. It hasn't gotten better, blah, blah, blah. And then when I test them for leaky gut, I find out they don't have it. They've been treating themselves all this time for something they don't have.
Yeah.
And it's just the symptoms of Candida overlap with leaky gut.
Yeah, correct. And so these patients actually had the fungus. They didn't even have.
They had chronic candidiasis. They didn't have leaky gut.
Yeah.
Yet there are quite a few who do have leaky gut. It's, I think, probably 20 to 30% out of all the patients who come to us with Candida have leaky gut, but not everybody does. People get it confused because the symptoms are similar to
very
Candida.
Similar. Yep. And so I guess that's one of my questions too, because I see a lot of that. I treat a lot of that. How would someone know if they have leaky gut versus just chronic Candida?
Best thing to do is test for it.
Okay. Yeah.
The traditional test is the lactulose mannitol recovery test, which I don't use anymore. I used it for many years. I don't use it anymore because I had too many false negatives on it.
Okay.
A zonulin test, whether it's stool or blood zonulin, is accurate. And also, there's a new breath test by a lab that I work with directly called Metasol Labs. They make a breath test where they can actually tell if you have leaky gut based on the gases in your breath. And I found that
Wow.
to be a very accurate test. So
Wow.
bottom line is you have to test for it.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so to kind of go over some of the symptoms, I guess, yeah, people come to you because they have all the symptoms, essentially what appear to be leaky gut. You said arthritis, you
No, I
said,
would say people come to me because they found they were diagnosed as having candida by a
okay,
doctor, and they've been bouncing from one doctor to the next for the last 15, 20 years, not getting well.
okay,
The story I hear is the moment I go off the diet, all the symptoms come back.
got it.
That's the typical story. So they come to me because I have a reputation of actually being able to handle it once and for all in people. And that's, I would say, primarily. But back to another angle on your question, very typically how it occurs is the person develops candida. Usually it's an iatrogenic disease. It comes from it's doctor induced. It comes from treatments like antibiotics, hormones, prednisone, cortisone, chemotherapies, and acids. Any of these medications will cause candida. Surgeries can cause candida. Accidents can cause candida. Swimming too much in a chlorinated pool can cause candida. And it all funnels down to anything that disturbs your intestinal flora will cause candida, because your normal flora contains candida and stops it from multiplying. Once you disturb that flora, however it is, if you disturb the flora from taking antibiotics or from drinking chlorinated water, whatever it is, that's how you get candida. And typically the first thing the person will notice is they start getting fatigued more than normal, and they start having cognitive problems. They're tired and they don't remember things. Then they start noticing their digestion's off. They'll be bloated, gassy, constipated. They start reacting to foods. If they eat sugar or carbs, they have all kinds of crazy reactions. If they drink alcohol, they get drunk 10 times faster and have hangovers that last for days, you see. Then they'll start getting allergies. They get airborne allergens, they get food allergies, and now they start becoming chemically sensitive. This is one of the last phases or stages of having candida when it gets really bad. We used to call them in the old days universal reactors, where they react to everything in their environment. Now there's a lot of other interests and designations for this kind of condition, because we know we have gene errors like the MTHFR.
Correct.
We know there's a lot of other reasons why they get this, but they're essentially becoming very strong reactors to everything in their environment. They can't tolerate being around cigarette smoke or perfume or anything like this. Now, in the meantime, while this is going on, often if the person has leaky gut, they start developing arthritic symptoms. And the arthritic symptoms are very particular to if they eat or drink something, you'll flare it up.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
So that's kind of the profile. Now, eczema and psoriasis have been linked to candida for many years. If you go on the internet and do a search for eczema, candida, or eczema and asthma even, you'll come up with millions of documents.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's also very common that autistic children develop candida because the very same, here, first off, first thing we have to understand about autistic children is their detoxification is impaired. These same kids with the genetic errors that they have these genetic errors impair their ability to detoxify. Why this didn't occur 100 or 200 years ago is because these kids weren't exposed to the same level of toxins. These kids with compromised detoxification in the 1800s weren't getting vaccines that had thimerosal. They weren't having amalgam mercury put in their teeth. So they didn't have the challenge to really overload their nervous system in that manner.
Yeah.
That was another story. And they usually develop candida from the same toxic metals. Like mercury is a huge inducer for candida. So the kids with autism, when they become copper toxic or mercury toxic, as a result of that, typically then also develop candida and then leaky gut. And now their immune system and their nervous system is completely overwhelmed.
Yeah. Geez. So like, if you're saying most of candida is iatrogenic, what do people do? Like, don't go swimming, don't take antibiotics, don't. I have a soapbox on antibiotics, but anyways,
Be aware. Be aware, as my old receptionist Janet used to say, be aware of what the causes are, what the symptoms are, so that you know. Like if a person is taking antibiotics, they need to take antifungals with them. The common thought is you take probiotics if you have antibiotics. The antibiotics just kill the probiotic.
Yeah.
Doesn't work. It doesn't work. See, if probiotics cured Candida, you and I wouldn't be talking. I'd be out playing golf. That's what the deal is. It doesn't work. It's part of a it's sort of almost like a scam going on. They push probiotics on people. Yeah. Probiotics are good, they're necessary, they're important, but they don't cure Candida. It's like you're playing musical chairs. When the Candida is there, it repels the probiotic.
Yeah.
You see, so in my book, I go through a whole list of the do's and the don'ts and the falsehoods. Yeah. One of the falsehoods is that probiotics will cure you of Candida. It won't.
Yeah.
The probiotic, when you get rid of the Candida, the probiotic will stop it from coming back, but it's not going to get rid of it.
Got it. And so what do you like? So I will tell you, I normally use like diflucan, and that's probably what most traditional Western medicine physicians use is diflucan.
Nystatin, ketoconazole, Sporanox.
Are you saying this is like wrong? Like
it's totally, it doesn't work.
We're doing everything wrong.
Look at the statistics. How many medical doctors ever cure anybody of Candida?
Well, I don't know. I have people who say
this is what I know. It's zero.
Zero. That low.
Zero. It doesn't happen, and I'm going to explain why it doesn't happen. When you take an antifungal to address Candida, after about 21 days on that antifungal, whether it's a pharmaceutical or an herb, the Candida begins to mutate and it becomes drug resistant against that medicine. And you can't get rid of Candida in 21 days. It's not long enough. Now, if you try to leave the person on the drug longer than that, you run the risk of damaging their liver and kidneys.
Yeah.
Or you just drive the Candida into super mutation. Nystatin is losing its effectiveness over the years in people because more and more Candida strains are becoming drug resistant to Nystatin.
Yeah, I have seen that. Very similar to different antibiotics. We keep using the same stuff over and over, and it's the same. But it's a failed attempt for the reasons that I just gave you. So in my book, one of the things that I point out why I've been successful is I put the person on a rotations of different antifungals. Like we typically pick 4 different antifungals and have the person rotate those 4 that would kill systemically every 4 days. So 16 days would be once through, and we have them do that until we see signs that those antifungals have done all they can do. Then they switch to a different set of antifungals that kill the Candida, particularly very deep in the intestinal tract, because that's the Candida that repels the probiotics. Yeah.
So we have phase 0. Our treatment starts with phase 0, which is like a bowel cleanse for people with Candida, which particularly uses diatomaceous earth to physically remove the Candida and parasites, because they all harbor together. See, when you have dysbiosis, the same environment that allows Candida to be there would allow protozoa and other bacteria.
Yeah, correct.
So when we get the person finished with that colon cleanse, which is their first step, then they go on phase 1, which is where we rotate systemic antifungals. Then when that's finished, we go to phase 2, which is where we use the antifungals that can kill the Candida deep in the intestinal tract. And the only antifungals that can really do that are ones that are fatty acid based, because they can get in and deep enough in there, because they're fatty acids, they're absorbed by the intestinal cells, and they can kill the Candida literally right at the roots. Now, when we've accomplished that, now the person's ready for probiotics.
Okay.
With one caveat. If they have leaky gut, you've got to handle the leaky gut before they go on the probiotics.
Yeah.
Because people with leaky gut are notorious for having bad allergic reactions to probiotics. And again, the probiotics can't stick in an intestinal tract that has leaky gut because of the porous nature of the gut.
Okay. Yeah.
So I've just taken you through phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, part A, B, and C of how we handle the Candida. That's the overview.
Yeah.
And if you
correct.
read my book, the book goes into all these stages in depth and detail, but that's the overview of essentially what we do. Now, when we get the person that far on phase 3, first thing we do is we test them for toxic metals and toxic chemicals, because those are the things that could cause their condition to reverse quickly and go back.
Okay. Which is why some people say this didn't work, or it worked and then it's back now, because they may have like this stuff.
Yeah, now they haven't handled underlying causes, which they're not aware of. See, because once you get Candida, there are things that will aggravate it. And it's not as simple as once you get Candida and you get rid of it, everything is unraveled.
Yeah.
That's not what happens. Because if you have Candida and then you acquire toxic metals like mercury, copper, iron, aluminum, any of those elements have their own angle on how they make the Candida worse or make it keep coming back. So you have to detox them of the metals.
Yeah.
Now, once you detox them of the metals or chemical toxins, now you have to rebalance all their vitamin levels and their hormones, their neurotransmitters, their minerals. You have to rebalance their entire biochemistry. Now, once you've done that, there's a really good chance the Candida is not going to come back now. But you've got to go through it in that order. If you try to do it in any other order, it's not going to work not that smoothly. And trust me, because I did it the wrong way for many years.
All these years you've studied this, you probably would know by now multiple failed attempts before you got to kind of what's works.
Exactly, because I listened to the patients. Now, there's a very famous doctor out in the Midwest whose name I'm not going to mention, but he is a big proponent of handling your mercury first when you have Candida, and he tells the patients, rightfully so, that your Candida may not go away as long as you have the mercury. But he starts detoxing them of the mercury right off the bat very aggressively. And I've gotten so many patients from this doctor because they all come to me and say, what he said made sense, but when I tried to do it, I couldn't handle it. I just got worse.
Okay.
See? So a lot of what I've learned is by listening to what didn't work.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, that makes sense. That's good. So then I guess, is there any foods that people can eat? Like after you do all this stuff, do they have to be on a certain diet, or is it going to come back, or how does that work?
The diet helps you get rid of Candida because it makes the Candida more amenable to dying when you hit it with the medicines.
Okay.
But there is no food that's going to get rid of Candida. There are only foods that make it worse. And essentially what makes it worse is sugars and starch. That's to make it really simple. Anything that's sweet or starchy will feed the Candida and make it worse. Yeah. So while you're getting rid of the Candida and you're treating the Candida, you want to make sure that you eliminate those things from your diet. Because if you think about this like a war, right? If you were in a war with another country, you wouldn't be sending them supplies.
Yeah, correct.
You shouldn't be. You shouldn't be.
Yeah,
you shouldn't be. But so you wouldn't be doing that. So you want to starve the Candida while you're hitting it with the medicines. And that's about the extent of the diet.
Okay.
Unless the person has food allergies that, you figure out, and then they don't want to do that because that aggravates leaky gut. Yeah. Or having allergic reactions going on in your gut aggravates the leaky gut.
And so do you guys in your practice do any, like you mentioned MTHFR, I do a lot of genetics and nutrigenomics. Do you guys need that in this practice, or is almost everything just based on these blood work, the breath test, et cetera, et cetera? Does any of the genetic components
we need that
matter?
Yeah. Oh yeah, they do, because later on, not in the beginning, later on they do.
Okay.
Initially, our first concern is get rid of the Candida, and shoot first, ask questions later is basically what it is. We've got to get rid of the Candida before we worry about putting things back together. So if your house was on fire, you wouldn't call Macy's and have new furniture delivered to the house. You put the fire out first.
Correct.
So that's what you have to do first. You have got to get the fire out, then get your basic structure back. You put your rugs back in.
Yeah.
You put your ceilings,
floors, your ceilings. In. Yeah.
Exactly. Your floor. And now, then after that, then you worry about rebalancing all the nutrients. That's the correct order to do it. Okay. Eliminate Dr. I forgot what his name was, from Harbor, Michigan. He is a metagenics consultant. I forgot his name, but he's a relatively famous nutritionist. And he came up with this idea of remove, replace. And that's basically what we're doing. We're first removing the bad organisms, the dysbiosis, then we're replacing the flora, and now we're rebalancing the biochemistry. Yeah. That's the concept.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Well, this was very interesting because I didn't even know this much about Candida. Who knows? I'm sure I've seen several patients where we thought it was leaky gut, that it ultimately ends up being Candida, And so I don't even know if there's anybody, you're right, in the Western medical field that dives into it as much as you do. And that's probably just, who knows why,
Well, there's a lot of reasons why. First off, the average MD doesn't have time.
Yeah.
The average MD usually spends 5 minutes or less with the patient. He's got his medical assistant there. They're doing everything. They're drawing the blood. They're asking questions. They're doing the whole thing. Then the doctor comes in, looks at the file, and he's presiding now, and he says, "Well, we're going to do this, this, and this."
Yeah.
But he spends 5 minutes. You can't spend 5 minutes with a Candida patient. There's too much to explain to them that they don't understand. They have a million questions about the diet. The medical doctor has to hire someone else to handle the Candida patients, and that's what that person does in his practice. He spends time with the Candida patients, handling them, explaining the treatment, explaining the diet, explaining the program, so they don't have time. The other aspect is they don't want it. Because if can you imagine if it was finally agreed upon that antibiotics caused Candida, and then you look at all the people with Candida and they've lost time with work. Some of them haven't been able to go to school, haven't been able to go to work. Can you imagine the class action lawsuits flying back and forth?
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of doctors don't want to know about Candida. They don't want to say it exists because of this reason.
Yeah.
Because remember, it's iatrogenic. It's caused by a lot of medications.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I for sure agree with that. What is your, so essentially when we get this Candida, you're feeling like in the gut, it just overgrows, almost like have you heard of small bowel overgrowth syndrome? That's kind of a new SIBO. Yeah.
Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
Correct.
Yeah, it's very similar to SIBO. In fact, SIBO and Candida often occur together, which is why we call it dysbiosis.
Got it. Yes, that makes sense.
We would loop both of those, all of those, having parasites, having SIBO, having Candida. We put it all under the umbrella of dysbiosis because it's actually rare you'll find a patient who has only one of those conditions.
Yeah.
Because the same gut imbalance causes one, it would naturally allow or encourage all of them to take place.
Yeah.
You normally, if you had a flashlight and we could miniaturize you and you could take a walk in somebody's intestines, you would see there'd be areas of nice flora.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you would come to this patch where you would find Candida, parasites, and harmful bacteria all clustered together with biofilm covering them to protect them. So you'd look at that for a while, you'd walk maybe 10 feet, and then you come again to a nice patch where it's all nice again. And then again, you'd come to another cluster of this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's how it works in the bowel. They're all synergistic, so they all tend to cling together. And then, unfortunately, you get that mycobacteria, which will harbor with the Candida, that will create the biofilm that hides them and makes it even more elusive to kill.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. So as a surgeon, I've done a lot of different things, but in wounds, a lot of wounds I've done have been very difficult to heal because of fungal, I almost feel like bacterial wound infections or whatever it is, even like ear, I've seen, swimmer's ear from bacteria. And then the ones that don't recover, it's usually because of a fungal infection. I've noticed in general, fungal infections are a lot harder to treat and to get rid of than it seems like bacterial infection. And is it because you're saying they develop these roots in the,
it's more because they're dimorphic and it's more their ability to mutate. Like we know about super strains of bacteria, we're concerned about.
Yeah.
We know about those. And the same thing is true in mycology. The difference is that fungus and yeasts are much more apt to mutate much quicker.
More than bacteria.
More than bacteria. That's what the problem is there.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I have found it very difficult to treat. It's like it takes forever for it to go away versus most people will be, and you even said it yourself, like most people for a bacterial infection will be on antibiotics for a couple of days. And you're even saying for a fungal infection, 21 days is not even, you know what I'm saying? It has to be a much longer period.
Usually 6 months on the natural antifungals is what it takes to eliminate them, because The other aspect that you're looking at is when we say the person with Candida has dysbiosis, nystatin, ketoconazole, these don't kill bacteria and protozoa.
Yeah.
Now,
correct.
luckily for us, the antifungals from the natural world, the herbal kingdom, kill the bacteria and the protozoa and the fungus all at the same time.
Yeah.
That's the other huge benefit, and you can be on them for longer periods of time as long as you rotate them.
Yeah.
That's the
Okay.
big plus point or advantage between the pharmaceuticals and the natural ones. The natural
Right.
ones are more broad spectrum, and the natural ones also you can be on long enough to get the job done.
Yeah. Probably with less side effects than the pharmaceutical ones, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yes, and that's a whole bag of can of worms, because with Candida you have Herxheimer reactions.
Yeah.
And the Herxheimer reactions sometimes are very difficult to separate out from the drug reaction that you're getting when you take the pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
With the herbs, it's a lot easier.
Okay. That makes sense. And so my last question, and you may have answered this when you said the 6 months, like these phases that people have to go through for chronic Candida, like how long typically does it take to get rid of completely? Is it a 6 month, a year? Does it depend on the person?
When the person comes to me, usually they do a month on phase 0 by itself.
Okay.
And sometimes we use phase 0 as a challenge or a provocation to the Candida testing to draw it out and make the test read more accurately.
Okay.
So if that's the case, then they would be on phase 0 for 2 months. Then when they go on phase 1, the reason we do the testing is to find out what we need to give them on phase 1. See, on my treatment, everyone who does the treatment doesn't take the same thing. It's not a cookie cutter
Correct.
program. We tailor the medicines we give them based on the tests that we do, because the tests will tell us what the most effective herb is going to be on them. So the person would then go on phase 1, usually for 2 months. Then they would be on the first part of phase 2 that kills the intestinal Candida for another 2 months. Then they would be on the flora rejuvenation program, which contains a lot of prebiotics and probiotics. They would be on that for 3 months. So we're looking at a total easily of about 7, 8, 9 months, depending on the person. And if they have leaky gut, then you can throw in another 3 or 4 months to heal the leaky gut. So you could be looking at a year to get through it all. And the thing about this that I really want to stress, when you go on the internet and you go to these forums and you go to these different boards where people are talking, you're going to hear crazy things. Like the person is going to talk about how he took 3-lac and it cured his Candida in 3 weeks.
Yeah. And you're saying that's not possible.
It is absolute nonsense. It's not possible. And the one thing that you'll find, if you inquire, is the person never tested themselves for Candida before or after. Most importantly, they don't have a test that will show you the Candida is now gone. What they're going by strictly is their symptoms. So what they might have done is put their Candida in a temporary remission.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that they had it in the first place, and no evidence that now it's gone or it's even stably gone. So when a person does my program, we're testing them every inch of the way. And we have a starting amount of Candida activity that we can measure very quantitatively. And then when we get to the end, the test tells us it's gone and the flora is back to normal.
Yeah. Wow.
So we can say with very overt confidence that we know, we have it documented that this is now handled. Here is the test showing that.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. That's great. No, I 100% agree. So thank you so much for being on the show and telling us all about Candida. This is the first time we've gone in this much depth and this much detail. And give us the name of your book again.
The name of the book is called The Candida Chronicles, written by Michael Biamonte, and you can get it easily on Amazon like you can get everything else.
Yeah, correct.
And I recommend people who have Candida, who've been struggling with it for years, get the book and read it, because it will make you feel so much better to learn what you were doing wrong or what your doctor was doing wrong. Correct. And now seeing why that was wrong and now finding out the right way to do it. Correct.
Getting the education that they need.
It's the first step.
Yeah, correct.
And if you'd like, I'm more than happy to come back and meet with you again, and we can talk about more in depth on Candida and different things that Candida does, because there's a million different viewpoints on how Candida affects the body. We've skimmed the top here today.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. I love that. Thank you so much for being on the show.
You're more than welcome.